Well, should we explain what Salesforce is for anyone who doesn't know? Probably because this is going
Absolutely.
to be
Thanks, Kevin.
very,
Yeah, that's
very,
smart.
very pertinent to my job now and this whole story. So, for anyone who doesn't know, Salesforce is a CRM, which is a customer resource management tool. So we'll dumb it
Software.
down for you. Yeah, so it's a software that sales teams will log into, and they basically say, I'm trying to sell this product to this customer, and it tracks what did you sell to who and why. And it's infinitely more complicated than that, but that's the simplest version of it. Is a is a sales team uses it to track the data of the sales process. So
Right.
IBM was trying to use Salesforce because they had built their own CRM from
Mm,
scratch, and they started to realize it wasn't very good. So I guess they had been using it forever and then wanted to switch to Salesforce. So we were actually spinning up an instance of Salesforce for IBM to sell one product on. So they had a SaaS product, I think, that they were trying to sell. So we were basically piloting, hey, let's stop using IBM's homegrown CRM and let's
mhm.
build our own Salesforce because this is a company who does it as their job, whereas we just made it because we wanted to, because it was cheaper at the time. So
Right. Well, yeah, I think big companies do a lot of that. I know at Schneider they had their own like quoting tool that looked like it was from the early 90s, and even when I
yeah,
was working there I was like, "What?" As they had built
that
it themselves, and then it was integrated in their process, and then they didn't want to replace it, and we actually replaced it with Salesforce. So I
there you
was
go.
I was pretty familiar with what they did. And they're like one of the top 10, I don't know what the ranking is, but an enormous company now. So
Yeah,
obviously what they do has a ton of value. And as a salesperson, having used it, like I think either you're using a software that doesn't do as much, or you're doing a lot of like handshakes and stuff on paper and signing.
hmm
Like there's so much that Salesforce can capture in terms of your calls and your meetings and who's going to buy this and how much it costs that is very important to business. So I can co-sign.
yeah, and yeah. So I think they had the original CRM they built themselves was a long time ago, and I think it was when they were mostly selling hardware. So I think the other thing was you sell a server, it's always going to cost X amount of dollars. It's always going to have to be shipped. It was all a pretty simple sales process. And when they started selling like services and software that was like being renewed on a certain basis and contracts got really complicated, all of a sudden, I think then that was when they realized like, oh, it will cost more to try to fix our broken tool than to just buy a new one. So that
Yeah.
was the team. That was the team I joined, not knowing what Salesforce was, never using anything related to sales at all because we were three industrial engineers in a process improvement team. But it was a new job that was exciting because it was something new that I had used internal IBM tools before, and I knew they all were not great. So the for the first, probably one of the very few times they were paying for like an industry leader tool, it was like, oh, cool. Like they're putting a lot of money into this. It's going to be an investment and it's going to be exciting because it's new and different. And so I saw an opportunity for a sales operations analyst role at a company called RedHat. And
Mhm.
I saw that you got to work with Salesforce and you did a lot of data analysis and it was in Raleigh and downtown. So it was super exciting. So I applied and then I got that job and then I left IBM. So pretty much every job I've had was definitely like a step up and incrementally better. Like I really liked that first job and the travel was cool, but obviously it wasn't sustainable. I really liked the second job that was like, oh, Salesforce is cool. I'm using my brain. I'm building reports and doing stuff, but I hate my boss. Red Hat was like a really great mix of the two things. I was using Salesforce and I was doing some data analysis, but I was also doing a lot of process improvement work similar to the first job that we
Okay.
were working hand in hand with sales teams that was like, how can a salesperson do this type of the sales process even better? And we were actually implementing new technology internally. So we basically were in charge of all the internal software tools. Anything a salesperson touched on their computer, we were kind of in charge of. But we were at the angle of like, how can they use the software the most efficiently and do that.
Yeah. What's one
Uh,
quick example of like a process you improved for the sales team?
so the biggest one was we put in a tool called Aptus, which is a quoting tool. So basically, there was in order for a salesperson to create a quote. So if they have a customer that says we want to buy Red Hat software, the customer says, how much is it? So in the simple, it's not simple, but it should be, is basically like, I need to email them a PDF that says how much I'm charging them. So at the simplest level, that's obviously what a quote is, right? But because Red Hat likes to complicate everything, it would be like, oh, but this customer 15 years ago, they were allowed to buy it at this price, and they're going to actually, they have 3 or 4 contracts they're going to renew, but one is a year long, one's 3 years long, one's actually 4.5 years long. Oh, and they're also going to pay, every 6 months instead of upfront. And how much? Oh, but then there's tax, and like how much money. And it's basically just a super complicated way of trying to figure out how much to charge somebody and have someone know what they're being charged.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tool they were using basically didn't have any guardrails. So like it was very simple in that you would just type in like, here's the person's name, here's how much I'm charging them. So what Apttus does inside of Salesforce is basically has your product catalog and doesn't allow you to sell something you can't, or at a price you're not allowed to. And so we made it so that they could build quotes faster. So you go in and you like grab your product, you grab your customer, and you basically say, this is how much it's going to cost. But then we put in a lot of guardrails for things like, oh, you can add a discount, but if you add more than this discount, it has to go to your manager to approve it. But then it's like, they need an email to get notified that they need to approve it. So we build in automation to say, send emails faster and do things like that. So It wasn't necessarily a process improvement project, but it was stuff like that. They were like, here's a new tool that you're going to use, and it's better for the company, and it's faster in this way, but also maybe stop you from doing things you weren't allowed to do. Because Red Hat, when I was there, was very much just like a corporate startup. So they're the size of a big corporation, but they acted like they were a startup. So they kind of were like, oh, we can make up whatever processes we want, and we'll just do whatever because we've been doing it. So yeah, so I'm a lead Salesforce consultant. So basically we have clients that have a multitude of Salesforce problems. So sometimes it's spinning up Salesforce for the first time. So they're like, we're moving from using a spreadsheet to using Salesforce. I'm actually specializing in Salesforce CPQ, which stands for Configure Price Quote. So it's actually Salesforce's version of what I did at Red Hat. That was, here's how you spin up a way to have a salesperson quote inside of Salesforce.